If you're anything like us, we bet you've been hooked on Yellowstone since its 2018 premiere too. The 4 seasons so far have been a worldwide sensation, and with the 5th only days away in November 2022, fans are dying to get back to the ranch and the Dutton family. In today's video, we're ranking the top 10 best Yellowstone episodes of all time, verified by both critics and fans. First up at number 10, we've got Going Back to Cali. If the name didn't already tell you, this episode was definitely an eventful one. We started with some drama on Beth's side of things when she leaked some top secret market equities information to the media. Their stocks dropped immediately, which was great news for Beth. In the same episode, she also reveals a huge secret to Rip, explaining that if he stays with her, she won't ever be able to have his children, which shocked audiences as well as Rip himself. On the other hand, Governor Perry makes Case an offer he can't refuse, asking him to take over the job of livestock commissioner. While all that's going on, the episode lives up to its name by dropping in some bikers from California. The West Coast guys aren't too polite, and John Dutton is really careful about his property, so he teaches them a lesson in the best way possible by making them dig their own graves, and adding that if they ever come back, their graves are still going to be there. The bikers thank John for letting them live, and soon enough, they've gone back to Cali. This episode got a crazy IMDB rating of 8.7, and we're just getting started. Next up, at number 9, The Unraveling, Part 2. As you can probably tell from the title, this is the second in a 2-part series. And by the time we get here, a lot of the drama has happened, and the characters are trying to clean things up. For starters, Rip killed a bear, and now he's part of a legal investigation. John does come to defend him, and while all that's going on, Jamie gets cut off from the family. Beth, naturally excited about it, goes to tell her brother that he's been fired. On top of that, Jamie is approached by Sarah, a reporter who's working on a story about Jamie and his dad. Jamie agrees to let her interview him, and moving on, we see that Monica's left Case, and he's coming home. Clearly, the whole thing affected him for the worse, because he's suddenly doing some shady stuff with Rip, such as hanging Dan Jenkins from a tree to get information out of him. As one of the most eventful episodes in the series, this is rated an 8.8. Coming in at 8, we have I Killed a Man Today. To start off, this episode deserves a full 10, just because of that title. It's definitely an intriguing one, and the actual episode doesn't disappoint either. Beth and Willa are back at it again in this episode, and this time, they're making each other's lives harder by messing up the stocks of their companies. Beth seems to have had a great time with this. Wade Morrow is out to start trouble again, and this time he goes a little too far. 2 of John's ranch hands, Colby and Teeter, find themselves turned into Wade's victims as he attacks them out of nowhere. He injured them pretty badly, and the worst part is that we don't even know what happens to them until the episode after. Monica takes on an heroic role in this episode, as she stands up for Native American women by helping to catch a murderer that's been targeting them, but she doesn't do it by investigation or using her detective skills. Instead, she poses as bait for the murderer. This might be okay, but she conveniently forgets to mention it to her husband until it's done, and it's that kind of drama that gets this episode an 8.8 rating. Now for number 7, Only Devils Left. We're back to some classic ranch problems in this episode, with the main one being that a lot of the Duttons' cattle mysteriously die, but their deaths weren't actually so mysterious, since it's later discovered that they were killed by someone. John already has a hunch about who did it, but he can't say anything until he's got some proof of it. He gets the sheriff to bring Case onto it, and it ends up being a super traumatic episode for him. While he does get to meet his wife and son again, he has to deal with witnessing the horrible death of a rancher's son, which he and the sheriff see when they go out to investigate who killed the cows. Jamie finds out that the ranch is in a trust, except that trust only has Beth and Case's name on it. He gets pretty mad about it and thinks he'd up for Jimmy when 2 men from his past find him and hunt him down. With so much going on, it's no surprise that this episode also gets an 8.8. Up next at 6, we've got Blood the Boy. This episode gives us a lot of backstories, seeing how it's mainly shown in flashbacks. We see why Jamie actually became a lawyer, and we can finally see why he wants to make everything right so badly. This is also why he's giving Sarah, the reporter, quotes about his dad and the ranch. But Sarah threatens to publish everything anyway, and in a fit of panic, Jamie does the only thing he can think of, and he strangles her to death. After that minor screw-up, he immediately calls Rip for help, who shows up to help out in the shadiest way possible. He frames Walker, an innocent ranch hand, by having him drive Sarah's car and get his fingerprints everywhere. Why? Only because Rip hates the guy. John also finally finds out who killed his cattle, and he joins forces with Dan Jenkins and Thomas Rainwater to stand up against their common enemy, the Beck brothers. This was definitely a game changer, and we moved up in the ratings to an 8.9 for this episode. For number 5, we have Sins of the Father. This episode was the season 2 finale, and there's a lot going on here. The main problem of the episode is that Tate, Case's son, gets kidnapped, and the entire family gangs up to do everything they can to get him back. Obviously, this is still Yellowstone, and nothing ever really happens peacefully on this show. In the process of getting Tate back, we see a lot of fights and some violent murders, which is exactly what has fans so obsessed with the show. In a more heartfelt moment, John finally accepts Rip as his own son and gives him a house and a place to live on his land. The rating was through the roof for this fast-paced episode, and it's currently a 9.1. Coming in at number 4, Meaner Than Evil. This is another episode that sees the eternal Beth Willa drama, and this time, Beth is losing. She's been fired from Schwartz and Meyer, but unlike her usual response, she actually takes it pretty well. But obviously, she goes on to threaten Willa, assuring her that the war isn't over and that she'll be back for revenge at some point. Moving on, Wade Morrow finally pays the price for what he did to John's ranch hands. Now that Wade is officially a bad guy, John takes the Yellowstone brand on his chest back from him. With so much drama and fighting going on, fans and critics love this enough to rate it a 9.1. At the bottom of the top 3, we have Enemies by Monday. Season 2 was definitely a crazy season for the family, and in this episode, Jimmy's father is killed. Rip helps him find and take revenge on the people responsible for the crime, and things get a little explosive. Jamie gets the news that he's going to be a dad and has to make a tough choice for himself and his future kid. On Monica's end, she gets accused of stealing from a store in town, and she has to call Beth to help her out. This episode leads to the finale, which means that Tate is kidnapped in the end, setting up the mission to find him in the next episode. Just like the finale, this is also a 9.1. For number 2, we've got The World is Purple. In this episode, we see Jamie getting to know his biological dad. Slowly, he loses his attachment to his adopted family, even though his actual dad killed his mom when he was a kid. In other news, Mia convinces Jimmy to get back into rodeo, even after that injury that made him promise John he'd never try again. John, Beth, and Case end the season 3 finale with targets on their backs, and the episode got a 9.2. And at number 1, Resurrection Day is the best. As the highest rated Yellowstone episode of all time at 9.5, this sees a romantic moment between Beth and Rip, which is a nice change for all the darker stuff in season 2. Jamie almost ends his life before his dad saves him, and Beth is approached by Malcolm Beck. When she doesn't agree with him, he sends his guys after her, who kills her assistant and beats up Beth. Luckily, Rip saves the day. That's a wrap for this video. Did you see any of your favorites here? Let us know in the comments below. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more videos like this. See you in the next one.